Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be taking you through the Writing and Language section of SAT Practice Test 1. I'll be teaching you grammar rules that you need to know and how to follow them, and I'll also be giving you advice on what to look for when taking the writing section of the SAT. Now, let's get started. So to begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read through the passage until I get to a question, and then I will show you what to look for. Alright, the title of the section is Way to Go. Greek yogurt, a strained form of cultured yogurt, has grown enormously in popularity in the United States since it was first introduced in the country in the late 1980s. From 2011 to 2012 alone, sales of Greek yogurt in the U.S. increased by 50%. The resulting increase in Greek yogurt production has forced those involved in the business to address the detrimental effects that the yogurt making process may be having on the environment. Fortunately, farmers and others in the Greek yogurt business have found many methods of controlling and eliminating most environmental threats. Given these solutions, as well as the many health benefits of the food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outdo the potential drawbacks of its production. Well, outdo, we know that just doesn't sound right. And when you're taking the SAT writing section, a lot of it is just finding out what sounds right. So we'll go ahead and read it and find what word we automatically want to put in when we're reading this out loud. So, given these solutions, as well as the many health benefits of the food, the advantages of Greek yogurt outweigh the potential drawbacks of its production, right? That's what naturally comes into our head, and usually that'll be the right answer. So we'll go look at our answer choices. We have outdo, which doesn't make sense. You can't have the advantages outdo the drawbacks, right? That just doesn't sound right. Do the advantages defeat the potential drawbacks? Well, maybe, but that doesn't really sound right either. Do the advantages outperform the potential drawbacks? Well, advantages don't outperform drawbacks, but advantages do outweigh drawbacks. So we're going to go ahead and answer D for number 1. All right, when I see a 1 by a sentence, I know that this is going to be a sentence where they're asking us where a particular sentence should go or be changed in order to make the paragraph more logical. So I'm actually going to go ahead and find what sentence I need to be looking at. So it says to make this paragraph most logical, sentence 5 should be placed where? Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and find sentence 5. I'm going to read it to myself, and then as I go through this paragraph, I'm going to try and figure out where it should go while I'm answering the other questions, so that way I don't have to reread it. Alright, so sentence 5 is right here, and it says, if it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid-way runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes. Alright, so I'm looking for something where it is leading in with our it, which is our acid way runoff, right? So if acid way is improperly introduced, so I want to find something that's kind of talking about acid way at the end of the sentence. So I'll go ahead and start reading from the top of the paragraph. The main environmental problem caused by the production of Greek yogurt is the creation of acid way as a byproduct. Because it requires up to 4 times more milk to make than conventional yogurt does, Greek yogurt produces larger amounts of acid way, which is difficult to dispose of. Okay, well, I know in sentence 5 it told me that if it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid way runs off and pollutes waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes. Well, I know in sentence 2 here, it tells me that Greek yogurt produces large amounts of acid way, so it's ending with acid way, which is our it in sentence 5, which is difficult to dispose of, which causes runoff. So I know what's going to be after sentence 2. So I can go ahead and answer that question number 5, and I will say C, which is after sentence 2. Alright, now I can go back and just start reading from where I left off, which is at sentence 3. To address the problem of disposal, farmers have found a number of uses for acid way. They can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement, and people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home by straining regular yogurt. Alright, well that kind of seems unrelated just off the bat reading it. So let's go ahead and read our question 2. Which choice provides the most relevant detail? Okay, well that makes sense. So it says they can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement, and people can make their own Greek-style yogurt at home by straining regular yogurt. Well, that's not really relevant, so we can get rid of A. Now what about B? They can add it to livestock feed as a protein supplement and convert it into gas to use it as fuel in electricity production. Well, that makes sense because we're talking about ways to dispose of our acid way that are better for the environment. Well, is using it as a protein supplement good for the environment? Yes. Is converting it to gas to use as fuel in electricity production good for the environment? Yes. So B will be our answer. Question 3. We'll go ahead and start with sentence 5. If it is improperly introduced into the environment, acid-way runoff can pollute waterways, depleting the oxygen content of streams and rivers as it decomposes. All right, so can pollute waterways. Well, let's go ahead and look at our answer choices. Well, I see B is out because it has waterways. Well, waterways don't own anything, so there's no apostrophe there. And then C, could have polluted waterways. Well, if it's improperly introduced in the environment, acid-way runoff, it can pollute. Not could have pollute. That's the wrong tense, right? It's not it could have polluted. It's that it can, because it can if it's done now, right? So it's not past tense and could have. It's can. It's present tense. And then we have has polluted waterways. Well, it's saying if it is, right? Or if it is tells us we're in the present tense. If it is improperly introduced into the environment, so if that were to happen now, it can pollute waterways, not it has polluted waterways. So our answer is going to be A. All right, question 4. Yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials. Well, right off the bat, I see yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials. This can't be a semicolon. It has to just be a comma, right? Because we're just making a list of 3. So we just find which one has a comma after scientists and no comma after and, because we don't need one there. We can't have a full colon, and we can't have no change, so our answer is going to be C. All right. Moving on. Question 6. Though these conservation methods can be costly and time-consuming, they are well worth the effort. All right, so we're asked, the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the writer do this? Well, let's go ahead and think back, right? Our last sentence, what did we talk about? We talked about how yogurt manufacturers, food scientists, and government officials are also working together to develop additional solutions for reusing whey. Okay. Well, what's our next sentence? Our next sentence after our initial lead-in is, nutritionists consider Greek yogurt to be a healthy food. It is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves to be a digestive aid. Well, we know to be, what sounds right there as we're reading? Well, we would think as we read, it's going to be as a digestive aid, right? And we can think about it like this. When it says it is an excellent source of calcium and protein, serves as a digestive aid, because this is saying present tense, right? It is. Well, is present tense, so we need present tense down here as well. So it would be serves as a digestive aid. And contains, right here in 8, because we know contains matches with is and serves, right? So we want our verbs to match. So our serves, right, has to match our contains. So we can actually go ahead and answer 8 as well. Okay, so now we gotta go back to 6. So the writer's considering deleting it. Should the writer do this? Well, we have options yes and no. So let's think. Though these conservation methods can be costly and time consuming, they are well worth the effort. And then it goes on to explain how there are lots of nutritional benefits, right? So it's explaining how it's worth the effort. And we're also connecting to our previous paragraph saying that the conservation methods, despite being costly and timing, are worth it. So I would say that we should not delete it, right? So we can go ahead and get rid of our yes deletes. We can say no, because it sets up the argument in the paragraph for the benefits of Greek yogurt, right? Which is D. All right, moving on, we gotta get to 9. Greek yogurt is slightly lower in sugar and carbohydrates than conventional yogurt is. Also, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, thereby helping people stay satiated for longer periods of time. All right, well, going back to 9, we see that these two ideas, they're linked, right? But there isn't really a relationship. They're just kind of linked together, like they're added on, right? So one kind of just adds to the other, right? So also is a good transition to have there, because there's really no causation, right? So we can't use therefore because there's no causation. We can't use in other words because we're adding a different idea. And we can't really use for instance, right? Because we're not actually explaining an instance. We're just giving a fact, right? So it's going to be also, which will be A. All right. Now we've got 10. So 10, we see that it's just a what word is best, right? So we'll go back, we'll read it, and then we'll figure out what word's best. Also, because it is more concentrated, Greek yogurt contains slightly more protein per serving, therefore helping people stay satiated for longer periods of time. All right, well, let's say you don't know what satiated means, right? Well, is eating Greek yogurt going to help you feel fulfilled for longer periods of time? No, because fulfilled has to do more with emotions, right? Now, what about complacent? Is it going to make you stagnant and not want to do things? No, that's not what it's saying, right? That's also kind of emotional. Now, is it saying sufficient? Well, let's go back and we'll try that one. Thereby helping people stay sufficient for longer periods of time? Well, sufficient in what? That's just not specific. It's just too broad, right? So we can go ahead and get rid of that. And we know that it'll be A, right? And if you knew what satiated mean, you'd know that it'd be A, because satiated pretty much just means that it makes you feel full, right? You don't need more food, you feel good, you don't need anything else, right? So you just go ahead and pick A. But if you didn't know what satiated mean, you can use process of elimination to find that it would be A. All right. These health benefits have prompted Greek yogurt's recent surge in popularity. In fact, Greek yogurt can be found in an increasing number of products such as snack foods and frozen desserts, because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it. Therefore, farmers and businesses should continue finding safe and effective methods of producing the food. Okay, well, we see that we have to solve, this is a grammar question basically, right? Because it's just finding what works here with punctuation. Alright, so because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, well, because this is telling me we have a dependent clause, right? Because it's a subordinate conjunction. So I'm going to go ahead and mark it with a D here for dependent clause. Well, we know that with a dependent clause, we need a comma after it, and then our independent clause. We need an independent clause here, and we need a comma here, right? So let's go ahead and find which ones don't have a comma and which ones do. Well, D doesn't have a comma. All of the rest have a comma. Right? All right, so now we got to find what's our independent clause going to be. Well, let's go ahead and read back again. Because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, what do we think would be the next word? Because a lot of times it's what sounds right. We wouldn't think it'd be therefore, right? So we can get rid of A. We would think, and support those who make and sell it. Because consumers reap the nutritional benefits of Greek yogurt and support those who make and sell it, comma, farmers and businesses should continue finding safe and effective methods of producing the food, right? And it's not going to be comma so, right? Because if we're doing comma so, we have to have an independent clause and an independent clause. Because that comma and then our fanboy so would mean that we would have a compound sentence. But we have a compound complex sentence because we have a subordinate conjunction here. So we know our answer is going to be B. All right. Dark snow. Most of Greenland's interior is covered by a thick layer of ice and compressed snow known as the Greenland ice sheet. The size of the ice sheet fluctuates seasonally. In summer, average daily high temperatures in Greenland can rise to slightly above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, partially melting the ice. In the winter, the sheet thickens as additional snow falls, and average daily low temperatures can drop to as low as 20 degrees. All right. Now we're asked in question 12, which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph? All right, so we got to take a look at the graph. And we're not just looking for what's grammatically correct, we're looking for what's correct according to the graph. All right, well, we see average daily low temperatures can drop what? What's the lowest average daily temperature? Well, we see that it's 12, right? So we know our answer can't be 20, it's got to be 12, so we can go ahead and get rid of no change. And we have a drop to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Typically, the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in the late summer. Okay, right off the bat, when I see a question, or as I'm reading, if I see this, I see a period and then the start of the next sentence, I'm kind of immediately thinking it's going to be a combine, the sentence question. So as I'm finishing my first sentence, as I say, typically the ice sheet begins to show evidence of thawing in the late summer, and I see this follows with this setup, I'm immediately thinking we're combining sentences and I'm doing comma following, right? Shows evidence of thawing in late summer following several weeks of higher temperatures. So a lot of times you can kind of figure it out as you go before you even see the question. So right off the bat then, I know that it's going to be A. And if I look at my other choices, I have and this thawing follows, well that's repetitive, and such thawing follows, that's repetitive, and this evidence follows, that's repetitive. Like all those are redundant, you see? So just by reading it and knowing that when I see a period by the start of a sentence and the end of the last one, it's probably going to be a combining the two sentences, I know my answer will be A. All right, 14. For example, in the summer of 2012, so we've got summer, virtually the entire Greenland ice sheet underwent thawing at or near its surface by mid-July, right? Well, what do we know? We know it typically shows evidence of thawing in late summer, but mid-July is not late summer, that's midsummer. It says the earliest date on record, right? Well, if we know that it's the earliest date on record that this happened, and we know that it typically happens much earlier, then we know that this is not an example. This is a contrast, right? So we can't have, for example, we can't have as such, and moreover doesn't fit, because that has nothing to do with contrast. However, though, that does contrast, so we know that our answer will be B. Alright, moving on. Most scientists looking for the causes of the Great Melt of 2012 have focused exclusively on rising temperatures. The summer of 2012 was the warmest in 170 years, records show. But Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, believes that another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem. Alright, well when I see 15, where it says, but Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, as soon as I see but Jason Box, an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, I know I have to end in a comma after Ohio State, right? Because this is explaining who he is, right? If you remove an associate professor of geology at Ohio State, you can, because it's a non-essential clause or phrase. It doesn't really matter as long as you know it's non-essential and you know it has to be offset by commas, right? So if we know it's non-essential, and we can know it's non-essential because if we remove it, the sentence still makes sense. So read, but Jason Box believes that another factor added to the early thaw of the dark snow problem. So by reading it like that, we know we can take out this whole thing because it's non-essential, right? Well, if it's non-essential, we can offset it by commas, and we know it has to be offset by commas because our first, right there, where I have that arrow pointing, we have a comma there, so we also have to have a comma after Ohio State. So we look for which one has that, and we see we can't have B because we do need that comma after Box in order for the sentence to work. So we can get rid of B. We're looking at A. We don't have a comma after Ohio State, so we can get rid of A. We look at B. B looks like it could be a, so we'll go ahead and circle, C. C has a comma after State and after Box, creating our non-essential phrase. So we can go ahead and circle C. Alright, 16. We'll go ahead and read, but Jason Box, we don't have to read the other part because it's not essential, believes that another factor added to the early thaw, the dark snow problem. Well, the early thaw, we are dubbing it or calling it the dark snow problem, right? But if we use a semicolon, if we're using a semicolon, 99% of the time the rule is you're going to have an independent clause after our semicolon, right? Well, is the dark snow problem an independent clause? No, not at all. An independent clause has to have a subject and a verb, right? The dark snow problem. Well, we know what he's trying to do, what the writer's trying to do here is dub this early thaw the dark snow problem with dramatic effect, right? Well, when you do that, you need a colon, right? You can't have a semicolon. If you have a semicolon, you have to have two independent clauses, so one on each side. But the dark snow problem is not an independent clause, so we can't have a semicolon. We have to have a colon. And then when we have that colon, we don't need the, right? When we have a colon, we're introducing our idea right into it. So the factor added to the early thaw, dark snow problem, right? So our answer is going to be C for 16. According to Box, a leading Greenland expert, tundra fires in 2012 from as far away as North America produced great amounts of soot, some of which, right? You see how I just did that on the spot? Some of which. Look at my answers. See, it's right there. A lot of times it's just what sounds right as you're reading through. Just try to fill in the blank when you see an underlined word or two words. Just think what makes natural sense as you're reading, right? So as I read it, I went ahead and I substituted it out because I knew what sounds right. A lot of times it's about what sounds right, and think about it. Of it drifted, well, what is it? We don't know, but of which the soot, right? So we know it'll be C. Alright, of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. Alright, so let's think here. And then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. So we have of which drifted over Greenland, so the suit of which drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke, and then fell as particles onto the ice sheet. Well, we know we have drifted. Well, drifted's past tense. And we have fell. Well, fell is past tense as well. Now let's look at our other choices. Falls. It drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then falls as particles? No, that's present tense. Will fall, that's future tense. Had fallen. Well, let's think. Drifted over Greenland in giant plumes of smoke and then had fallen as particles? Well, that just doesn't even sound right. Like I said, guys, a lot of this is just about what sounds right, but even if we want to break it down, if we think we have suit, well, if we were writing this and we were writing about suit that fell on to the ice sheet, if we were writing this about what happened in 2012, we would say suit fell on the ice sheet in 2012. Right? A lot of times it's really just what sounds right. Because, guys, I mean, you can spend all your time learning about the English language and all the grammar rules, but honestly, a lot of times it really is just what sounds right. What if we were to switch fell out and we were to say suit had fallen on the ice in 2012? Well, the had fallen, it just creates redundancy, right? You can just really simplify it by saying fell. So we know our answer is going to be A, no change. All right, 19. Scientists have long known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting its ability to reflect the sun's rays. All right, well, right off the bat, I see it's. Well, I know that this can't even be right because it's written like this with an apostrophe is it is. But in the way that it's worded, you can clearly say they're trying to show the possession of something's ability, right? That something has an ability. So it's not going to be it is ability. It's going to be the thing's ability, right? So likewise, we can get rid of there because it's the wrong type of there. So now we're between it's and there. So let's go ahead and read and find what is the there or what is the it's. Right? So scientists have long known that soot particles facilitate melting by darkening snow and ice, limiting its ability to reflect the sun's rays. Well, it's not limiting the soot particles' ability to reflect the sun's rays. It's limiting the snow and ice, right? Well, snow and ice, that's plural, right? If we were to say the snow and ice's ability to reflect the sun's rays, let's think about it, right? By darkening the snow and ice's ability to reflect the sun's rays, by darkening the snow and ice's ability to reflect rays. If we were to use its, that doesn't work because its would be our singular, right? It's not singular, it's plural. So it's going to be D. All right. As Box explains, soot is an extremely powerful light absorber. It settles over the ice and captures the sun's heat. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle. So if I see something like that, a result or a causation, I want to pay attention to that. As the ice melts, the land and water under the ice become exposed. And since the land and water are darker than the snow, the surface absorbs even more heat, which is related to rising temperatures. All right, well, what's my question here? What choice best completes the description of a self-reinforcing cycle? Okay, well, I see as ice melts, land and water become exposed. The land and water are darker than snow. The surface absorbs more heat. And since it's a self-reinforcing cycle, I know that the surface absorbing more heat has to cause even more heat, right? So that even more ice melts, which is related to rising temperatures. Well, related isn't what we're looking for. We are looking for causation or result, like a self-reinforcing cycle means that the next thing, so the surface absorbing more heat, will cause even more damage to our end result, right? An even greater extent to our end result. So greater extent. Let's go increasing extent to our end result. So we're looking for a statement that says that. All right, so the surface absorbs even more heat, which leads to additional melting, right? That's the subject of our entire passage, and that's the ultimate self-reinforcing cycle we're talking about. So our answer is going to be D. Box's research, oh, we got a 1 here. What does that mean? It means we look and see what we have to find. To make this paragraph most logical, sentence 4 should be placed where? All right, so sentence 4, we'll read that. Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. So we're looking for something that talks about crucial information, and this should come after it, right? All right. Box's research is important because the fires of 2012 may not be a one-time phenomenon. According to scientists, rising Arctic temperatures are making northern latitudes greener and thus more fire-prone. The pattern box observed in 2012 may repeat itself again. Well, may repeat itself again. Think about how redundant that is, right? Well, repeat itself, it already means again, so we don't need again. A lot of times on the SAT, there will be questions about redundancy. We want to eliminate redundancy. Okay, that's something that they want you to know, is to not be redundant. Repeat itself again is redundant. You don't need again. Likewise, we have with harmful effects. We don't need with damage and harmful effects. Damage and harmful effects, that would just create redundancy. So we get rid of C. And then possibly, we have may. May and possibly, redundancy. We can get rid of that. We get rid of no change because it has again. We're left with B. Alright. Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. Well, we have not been given crucial information, so we know it can't go anywhere before where it's at right now or where it is at right now. So 5, the next step for Box and his team is to travel to Greenland to perform direct sampling of the ice in order to determine just how much the suit is contributing to the melting of the ice sheet. What is that? That's crucial information he needs. That's at sentence 5, so we know it must come after sentence 5. Alright, co-working, a creative solution. When I left my job as a website developer at a small company for a position that allowed me to work full-time from home, I thought I had made it. I gleefully traded in my suits and dress shoes for sweatpants and slippers, my frantic early morning bagged lunch packing for a leisurely midday trip to my refrigerator. The novelty of this comfortable work-from-home life, however, soon got worn off quickly. No. It can have soon worn off quickly, or should it just be wore off quickly, right? Eliminate redundancy. Soon worn off quickly. Well, soon worn off. Soon worn off does not sound right. What's the number one thing that we want to remember? That I want you to remember? I'm not associated with the College Board, so don't think like that. But the number one tip that I would give you is to think about what sounds right on the SAT writing section. Well, what sounds right? Well, let's think. The novelty of this comfortable work-from-home life, however, wore off quickly. Not soon worn. Soon worn is not grammatically correct. Doesn't make sense. What about promptly wore off? Quickly? We have quickly. We don't need soon. We don't need promptly. Okay, if we have quickly, we don't need promptly or soon. That's redundant. We want to eliminate redundancy. That's my other big tip. Okay, so our answer is going to be D. Within a month, I found myself feeling isolated despite having frequent email and instant messaging contact with my colleagues. Having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, no colleagues were nearby to share ideas. Alright, that kind of doesn't sound right, so I'm going to look at what we have to change. Alright, so we're given our options up here, so we're going to kind of plug in our options as we read through. So having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, we already said A doesn't really sound right. But what about B? Colleagues were important for sharing ideas? I mean, that doesn't really sound right either. And the other thing I know is having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems is not an independent clause. That's not a sentence, right? We don't have a subject and a verb. There is no subject in here. So we know we have to have an independent clause as one of our answer choices. What's our only answer choice with an independent clause? Well, C says ideas couldn't be shared with colleagues. That is not an independent clause. What about D? I missed having colleagues nearby to consult. That is. And does it also make sense? Because we can double check by doing that. Having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, I missed having colleagues nearby to consult. Yes, independent clause and makes logical sense, right? And my handwriting is really bad, so just kind of listen to what I say. All right. Question 25. It was during this time that I read an article into co-working spaces. That makes no sense, right? Into, not even close. All right. Before I even look at these answer choices, what am I filling in as I read? Think. It was during this time that I read an article about co-working spaces. I don't even have to look at the answer choices. As I read and I see one word underlined, immediately I'm thinking what word needs to replace it. If a word needs to replace it. Maybe it makes perfect sense, in which case we read on and we look at our answer choices, see if there's anything that would work better. If there's not, we can do no change. But usually as you're reading it, you'll read it and you'll notice this word doesn't sound right. It's underlined. What makes sense in place of it? And you'll automatically fill it in your head as you read, and that'll usually be your answer. The article, published by Forbes magazine, explained that co-working spaces are designated locations that for a fee individuals can use to conduct their work. The spaces are usually stocked with standard office equipment such as photocopiers, printers, and fax machines. Alright, well, what do I know? I know when I have such as, I do not need punctuation after it, because my such as introduces the items and the list that comes after it. My such as acts as my introduction to my list. So I know I don't need a comma after such as. I know I don't need a colon after such as, and I don't need a colon after such as either in V. Therefore, I'm left with A, because it's the only one that has such as followed by the list directly. Alright, next. In these locations, however, the spaces often include small meeting areas and larger rooms for hosting presentations. Well, in these meetings, however, what is our contrast? In these locations, however, what are we contrasting? Why do we need however there? We don't. We're not contrasting anything. So let's look at our options here and see what one makes the most sense. Let's start with B. In addition to equipment, which we just discussed, so we're making a good transition, the spaces often include small meeting areas and larger rooms for hosting presentations. Well, yes, that's accurate. Our transition is accurate. It connects it to the sentence that was previous to it, so we know B is our answer. Alright, question 28. The cost of launching a new co-working business in the United States is estimated to be approximately $58,000. What does that have to do with anything we just read, right? I mean, absolutely nothing. So what's our question? The writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? Deleted. What did we just say? We said it has nothing to do with what we just talked about. I mean, it's very loosely related, which is in C. Deleted because it blurs the paragraph's main focus with a loosely related detail. Alright, and we could see if we weren't sure and we read D first or whatever, deleted because it repeats information that has been provided that hasn't been provided. So we'd know deleted because it's a loosely related detail, and you should know that just from reading the passage too. Alright. What most caught my interest, though, was a quotation from someone who described co-working spaces as melting pots of creativity. The article refers to a 2012 survey in which 64% of respondents noted that co-working spaces prevented them from completing tasks in a given time. Well, that has absolutely nothing to do with our quote from our article here, or really anything, right? In fact, that contrasts what we've been reading about how co-working spaces are good. Alright, so we can go ahead and we can we'll read question 29, right? So it says, at this point, the writer wants to add specific information that supports the main topic. This does not, so we know our no change is not going to be correct. Alright, so no change is out. Which choice effectively completes the sentence with relevant and accurate information? It has to be accurate, based on the graph above. Okay, I see we have melting pots of creativity here, so we're looking for kind of support there, because it's probably there because it wants us to connect it there, right? The article refers to a 2012 survey in which, I'm going to look at creativity. We have 71% respondents that had a positive impact. I'll look at my answer choices. B, 71% of respondents indicated that using a co-working space increased their creativity. Just double check to make sure that that is what the graph is saying. All right, positive impact on creativity, 71%. Does that also connect with our previous sentence and our lead-in? It does. So B will be our answer there. All right, so now we got to get to 30. The article goes on to suggest that the most valuable resources provided by co-working spaces are actually the people whom use them. Usually if you have whom, a lot of times there'll be a question of who versus whom. Okay, a quick trick for this is if he or she can replace our insert question here, right? So if it's whom or who, whatever, if he or she can replace it, so who or whom, and it makes sense, so it flows grammatically right, it sounds right. That's a lot of grammar is sound, and it makes sense, right? So if he or she can replace it, then we're going to use who. Then who is our answer, or is likely to be our answer, right? It's pretty much going to be your answer, more than likely. Alright, so let's go ahead and try it, right? The article goes on to suggest that the most valuable resources provided by co-working spaces are actually the people whom use them or who use them. Well, let's think about it. Are actually the people who use them? What sounds better? Well, who does, just off the bat. But if we were to go ahead and check it, we have this rule, and then we also have the rule of if him or her sounds right or makes grammatical sense, then we use whom. And if neither of these tricks work, what you have to remember is that whom is used when it is the object of a preposition or a verb, right? So I'll go ahead and put that one here too. So whom is used when it is the object of a verb or preposition. All right, well, let's check. Is whom the object of a preposition or verb? Well, we have are actually the people whom use them. There's no verb and there's no preposition, so we know we need to use who. Okay. Now we have B and A are out, so we have who uses or who use. Well, what is our noun or our subject? It is the people. Is it the people use them or the people uses them? The people uses them. That's not right. It doesn't sound right. The people use them, right? So it's going to be who use them. So our answer will be D. Okay, I see I have a 1 here. That means I need to find where I'm being asked. So we have it in 31. The writer wants to add the following sentence to the paragraph. After filling out a simple registration form and taking a quick tour of the facility, I took a seat at a table and got right to work on my laptop. The best placement for the sentence is immediately where. Alright, so we know that this is him entering the facility, basically, taking his quick tour, and then getting to work. So we're looking for where that fits. So we'll go ahead and start reading. Thus, even though I already had all the equipment I needed in my home office, I decided to try using a co-working space in my city. Because I was specifically interested in co-working's reported benefits related to creativity, I chose a facility that offered a bright open work area where I wouldn't be isolated. Throughout the morning, more people appeared. Okay, so what do we see? We see from here to here, we transition from him choosing his facility to him meeting people. Well, what comes in between that? In between choosing a facility and meeting people is filling out our registration form, taking our tour, and then getting to work. So we know that we need to come with our sentence between 2 and 3. So after sentence 2. Okay. Throughout the morning, more people appeared. Periods of quiet during which everyone worked independently were broken up occasionally with lively conversation. I like the experience so much that I now go to the co-working space a few times a week. Over time, I've gotten to know several of my co-working colleagues, and then he lists them, right? Another website developer, a graphic designer, a freelance writer, and several mobile app coders. Okay, when we have a list like this, we can use a colon, right? We can use a colon to introduce our list. We can't use a semicolon, right? Our semicolon is for splitting up independent clauses. We can't use a comma. We can't say of my several co-working colleagues and then go comma and then start listing. It doesn't work like that, right? So we can't use that. We can't just say colleagues and then say colleagues another website developer. It doesn't work. What we can do is we can use a colon to begin our list. So our answer will be A. All right. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to share advice and help each other brainstorm. Okay, what I'm looking for when I see share advice and help each other brainstorm, there's potential for redundancy here. Right? There might be two answers where there's redundancy, or maybe there's some unrelatedness. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Our options are give some wisdom, proclaim our opinions, or opine. Well, when I read proclaim our opinions, it just doesn't sound right to me. So I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of it. And a lot of times, right, you'll read it, and if something is kind of out there and it just doesn't sound right, or if it sounds like it's just the tone isn't right, it doesn't fit with the rest of the passage, or the style doesn't fit with the rest of the passage, you're going to want to eliminate it, right? Anything with kind of like a slang tone, if it's in a formal paper or something like that, you're going to want to get rid of. So proclaim our opinions, no. Opine, you might not know what opine means, right? So you might want to just not completely X it out if you don't know what it means, but maybe put a dash by it saying, I'm not really sure. I'm going to kind of give it, see if there's something else that works. All right, B, give some wisdom. Let's see. Even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to give some wisdom. Well, that's kind of lengthy, right? And it's not necessarily redundant, but it's really lengthy, and there's probably an easier way to say that. Well, what about are able to share advice, right? That's a lot better. It's shorter, it takes less words, it's more straight to the point. So our answer, I would pick A, right? And if you didn't know opine, you'd be like, yeah, A sounds great. I don't know what opine means. A is going to be my answer. And that's really all there is to it, right? So you go ahead and pick A. And sometimes if you don't know a word, it might be for a reason, right? Maybe that word is just kind of an unrelated one that they think maybe people pick because they're not confident in their abilities. When you're taking the SAT, confidence is your friend. If you're not confident, it's going to be tough for you to make the right call. You want to be confident in what you're doing. All right. We got our last passage here. The Consolations of Philosophy. Long viewed by many as the stereotypical, useless major, philosophy is now being seen by many students and prospective employers as in fact a very useful and practical major, offering students a host of transferable skills with relevance to the modern workplace. In broad terms, philosophy is the study of meaning and values underlying thought and behavior. All right, so it's giving a broad definition of philosophy, so I don't see anything inherently wrong with what's said here. I don't see anything that really stands out to me, but we'll go ahead and look at our other options, right? Okay. For example, philosophy is the study of meaning. Well, we're not really giving an example, right? We're giving a definition. So in broad terms, well, that's giving us our definition in broad terms. Now, we're not giving an example. We're not doing contrast. And we're not supporting something by saying nevertheless, or saying despite this thing's flaws, it's nevertheless a great alternative to something else, right? We're giving a definition. Nevertheless doesn't work when we're giving a definition. We're giving terms, our answer is going to be A. All right. But more pragmatically, the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material, question conventional beliefs, and express thoughts in a concise manner. Okay. But more pragmatically. That doesn't sound inherently wrong, but I would go look at my other options, right? Speaking in a more pragmatic way, speaking in a way more pragmatically, in a more pragmatic speaking way. What are these all? They're all repetitive and redundant. The two things that I absolutely despise when taking the SAT writing section are repetitiveness and redundancy. And this has both on all three answers, B, C, and D. So I'm certain that my answer will be A when I see that. Okay, we want to avoid repetitiveness and redundancy. Or repetition and redundancy. I'm sorry. That was a grammar error on my part. But all right, moving on. Because philosophy teaching students, because philosophy teaches students. I see that. It's one word underlined. I know I'm replacing the word. What sounds right teaches. So I know that B will be my answer. All right, and then I move on. Now we have teaches students not what to think, but how to think. The age-old discipline offers consistently useful tools for academic and professional achievement. A 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges require at least one philosophy course. All right, well, what's my 37? It's which choice most effectively set up the information that follows. Well, what information follows? The information that follows is an example of how American colleges aren't that interested in requiring philosophy courses, right? The demand for philosophy courses is down. All right. So what would set that up? Well, it's telling us the information that follows. So I'm actually going to read one sentence further to get more of what follows. Therefore, between 1992 and 1996, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated from institutions. So our demand for philosophy as a major and as a course is down at American universities. All right, what sets that up? Consequently, philosophy students have been receiving an increasing number of job numbers? No. Or job offers? No. Therefore, because of the evidence, colleges increase their offerings. That is not what happened. Notwithstanding the attractiveness of this course of study, which is what it was saying above, students have resisted majoring? Maybe, but probably not, because we're really talking about what courses are offered by universities. However, despite its many utilitarian benefits, colleges have not always supported the study of philosophy. right? That's what we're getting after. It's not really about students. Okay, that's kind of a stretch, and that's an answer I'd only go to as a last resort if D was not what it is, right? If D was something completely unrelated. But we know we're talking about the universities, right? We're talking about American colleges. We're talking about eliminated from institutions. So we know it's among colleges that aren't supporting philosophy. Question 38. All right. So we have a transition word here, so we have to find which transition word works. Well, we'll read our sentence prior. A 1994 survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. And then we have between 1992 and 1996, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated from institutions. All right, well, we know that our demand, which we'll say D, for philosophy majors went down, right? So we had colleges cutting philosophy programs from their institutions, and we have American colleges requiring less philosophy courses, right? So these are two things that are similar. They both talk about cutting philosophy courses. So it's not going to be however, because that would be contrasting, and these are similar, right? These are adding ideas. They support each other, so it's going to be moreover. All right. More recently, colleges have recognized the practicality and increasing popularity of studying philosophy and have markedly increased the number of philosophy programs offered. By 2008, there were 817 programs, up from 765 a decade before. In addition, the number of four-year graduates in philosophy has grown 46% in a decade. All right, so we're seeing increased growth, right? So demand up, growth up among philosophy. Also, studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical writing. Okay, right here, if you listened to what I told you earlier, you'd see we're probably looking at a combining of our sentences because we have a period followed by the start of a sentence that's underlined. So we're looking at 39, what choice most effectively combines sentences at the underlined portion. So just like I said, you want to look for that. So now as I'm reading through it, I can kind of just read as I go and not look at the answer choices and not get distracted by any tricks that might be there, right? I can just read through and then think through my head as I'm reading, what can I do to merge these sentences together? So I'll go ahead and do that. Also, studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical writing. These results can be measured by standardized test scores. Well, what can we replace it with? In both verbal reasoning and analytical writing as measured by test scores, right? Because if we think about it, that's all that these results can be measured by standardized test scores. Well, we're given our results up here, so we don't need to repeat these results. We can just say as measured by standardized test scores, which will be A. Right? And if we look at D, the results, that's repetitive and redundant, same in B, which can also be, that's just kind of repetitive, you're not going anywhere. We want purpose with our words. All right. On the graduate record exam, the GRE, for example, students intending to study philosophy in graduate school has scored or have scored. Well, that's going to be have scored, right? As we read through, we want to think about what sounds right. What sounds right is have scored higher than students in all but 4 other majors. Scores? No. Scoring? No. Have scored. So our answer there is going to be B. All right. Next up. These days, many students majoring. Many students majoring? Are the students owning the majoring? No. The students do not own the majoring. Right? And I know that sounds silly, which it is, which is why we can get rid of it. A is out. All right, these days, many students, we're not going to need an apostrophe in our students, right? Many students major in philosophy. Many students major in philosophy have no intention. We know that that's not right. It's many students majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. So our answer is going to be B. Instead, they plan to apply those skills to other disciplines. Law and business specifically benefit from the complicated theoretical issues raised in the study of philosophy, but philosophy can be just as useful in engineering or any field requiring complex analytical skills. All right, 42. At the point the writer is considering adding the following sentence. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, for example, wrote many of his works in the form of dialogues. What does this have to do with philosophy? Not much at all. Only the fact that Plato was a philosopher, that's about it. And then we're talking about dialogues. Well, what were we just talking about? We were just talking about engineering and complex analytical skill. Is a dialogue any of that? Not really, right? So should we make this addition here? Absolutely not. We get rid of our yeses, we're left with our nos. Okay, now before we read the rest, we want to come up with our own idea so we don't get distracted by answer choices. Why? Well, because it's not related to what we were just talking about, right? It's blurring our focus of what we were just talking about. So our answer choices: C, no, because it blurs the paragraph's focus by introducing a new idea that goes unexplained. We can quick check if it goes on unexplained. That these skills are transferable across professions, which makes them especially beneficial to 21st century solutions. Yeah, it doesn't really look like it's going to get explained. So we're going to go with C. And if we look at D, because it undermines the passage's claim about the employability, this has nothing to do with employability, our quote up here. So we can get rid of D. We know our answer will be C. All right. That these skills are transferable across professions, which makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. All right. So I've got a couple options here, right? I've got that and delete, or keeping it as the same. So I'm going to go ahead and reread it. That these skills, these complex skills, right? These skills to solve problems they're talking about, that these skills are transferable across professions, makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. Our which here creates redundancy and repetitiveness again, which is our worst enemy on the writing section, right? If we were to say that makes them especially, we don't need that, right? We can really just get rid of it. And if we just read it without it, which I recommend reading the sentence after you replace in your word to just double check that it makes sense and flows and is grammatically correct. So we'll go ahead and check that these skills are transferable across professions, makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. That's great. There's not repetitiveness, there's not redundancy, which are the two big key things that I want to stress. We don't want those. All of our other answer choices add repetitiveness or redundancy or both, so our answer will be D. Because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs, some of which may not even exist yet, during their lifetime. See how I did it? I'm putting it right in there as I read. What would I say if I were writing this? I would say there. Why? Because it's the student's lifetime, right? And we can look back. We see our dash here, and we see our dash here, which means that this is a non-essential phrase, so we can remove it and read it without it. So we have because today's students, there's our subject, today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs during our lifetime. Well, today's students, it's their lifetime. So our answer is going to be there. Thank you for watching Preeminent Test Prep. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share as we will be releasing more videos to help you prepare for the SAT.